clear. If you mute the speech that shakes your frail beliefs, you only seek to insulate your image and continue down the stream in the direction clout and credit steers. Directly from your mouth into am I the asshole Reddit's ears. Directly back into the greasy pockets of some Gates Foundation financiers. And then directly back into the frantic final thoughts of early trial Neuralink volunteers, staring at the numb and mumbling vacancies where recently had been their peers. Half of whom are glitching with the memory stuck on pause, and half have zero fucking clue just who they are or why they're here. It's been said that fear is all we have to fear, but that was back before the basosphere condenser came along, distilling concentrated fear that's diamond pure, crystal clear, oppressor strong, and woven into every single article you read and song they let you hear. And then Elon heard that Jeff enhanced our fears by 86%, and he said, hold my beer. And not a single sheep among the herd would turn their head or say a word, cause they were all too busy begging for the shears, begging for the muzzle, happy just to guzzle, feed, and watch a screen for all their years. Man, to each his own, can't afford a home, but they'll let you have your cozy little ecosphere. Where there among your own devices you can break the seventh seal, overthrow the oracles and slay the seer. All the tomes were burned and all the lips were seared. Shut your eyes and all our lives just disappear. Now blink 'em twice. Welcome to your ecosphere.
They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. It's 'cause you are. They'll gladly stagnate a living wage, snap the chains, bury it. Labor slaves in rusty cages dragged behind a chariot, led by Mr. Racial Jungle, Joseph R. Iscariot, fighting over scraps as they barrage us all with variants and BuzzFeed clickbait, straight until we're paralyzed, trying to distract us from the concentration camps that Joe had swore he'd close but only chose to amplify, where they got 50-something kids in cages made for 5 to occupy. And no, she hasn't seen the camps, but Harris swears they're paradise. She tells us the facilities are safe, and that right down to the women, they are regularly sterilized. Then she throws her head back and she proceeds to laugh, that sort of heartless cackle you'd expect from someone working steadfastly on behalf of the virus and a Congress full of parasites. And where was I? I was busy cashing every blue check, demonstrating plainly all the narratives expected from the verified. I was busy breeding verbal leeches by the terabyte. Train them to exsanguinate the wealthy while they sleep at night. Bleed the oil barons dry and barren. Say they showed us how to share and now we share alike. Tell them I contracted rabies from a feral mic. Now I'm just another species losing sleep to noise pollution and these glaring lights, forced to change its habits and adapt to just survive. But Now it's safe to say that some of us are thriving in the moment, throwing shit on presidential homes beneath the Paris skies. So if you feel like you're just powerless, I guess you bought the lie. But I can tell they're petrified of our collective might, 'cause I can hear those gentrifiers weeping at the sight of our collective rights. And I only can imagine the intensifying fear of knowing revolution's near, and all that's left to do is simply wallow in the thick anticipation of the rapid bite. And baby, one day you can ask your leaders just what that was like before you grab a slice. So if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. Honey, if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. See, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, and tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark, because you aren't, because we aren't. You see, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and make you build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, where they'll tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark, because you aren't, because we aren't.
Legend says that Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back and every day wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And Reade came out to say the man they tried to label the Messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer, and knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US printed walking papers, and knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character, that his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation. So if you really think there's something to be gained out of sharing your pain with the world, you are sorely mistaken. The Biden team just dragged their feet addressing Tara's allegations. Until they had a decent list of smears, then they aired them out on every station. And it turns out no one wants to hear the truth of who they praised as being worthy of such bloated liberal celebration. That no one wants to really know the person they've so valiantly defended, even when it meant they had to gloat and shit all over someone braver than they'd be if given the occasion. Now cue the faceless comment squad invasion. Cue those fuckers crawling out the woodwork to come analyze the way you wore your hair and what you wear. Like your appearance waives your rights, or that somehow you're the reason for your situation. Somehow they've decided you should bear responsibility for what such monstrous men insist on doing. Somehow they're deluded by the empty, hypocritical, and useless fucking platitudes that bastard keeps on spewing. And I think it's very telling that the best of their excuses when they try to come and justify our president's abuses is a hearty butt Trump. In which case I'll remind you that you never saw the news attempt to sell us Donald Trump like he was morally upstanding or a decent human. But when Joe says something bigoted or ogles someone's little kid, CNN says, isn't this refreshing? Biden's like a mix of JFK and FDR with all the finer parts of Harry Truman. Christ, I know that they don't think that we're the brightest, but at least pretend we got a couple lumens. Ask yourself if you have ever questioned what they fed you, or do you just shut your eyes and then consume it? And now ask yourself if you ate every one of Biden's lies under guise of harm reduction and the promise of a slight improvement. And now imagine long ago that Biden chose to show you who he really was by traumatizing you for his amusement. Now imagine that you watched him touch a Bible with those filthy hands, and then assume the power of the highest seat in all the land, of knowing your attacker wields a global coalition born of three-letter agencies who'll make a life's mission out of trying to discredit you through lies, damn lies, and collusion. Big tech is never gonna separate from our surveillance state. Fuck's sakes, they're just a breath away from total fusion. So there will come a time where even if you see the light, your voice will never reach the sky through all the bots and all the noise pollution. So trust us when we tell you that the masking of abuses is perhaps this country's oldest institution. And I know nothing nobler than facing it in honor of the truth when you know that the people holding power have been neutralizing truth since there was wet ink on the Constitution. So know that Tara's truth is something crucial to the movement. And if you see yourself a partner to the revolution, help this country see through all the baseless propaganda through the crux of Joe's illusions. And recognize that Tara Reade gave everything she had so she could tell us what the truth is. Recognize the decent thing to do when someone bears their soul and shows their bruises is not to ask for context or offer up your own solutions. Your job is just to listen with an honest mind and put yourself on Tara's side a moment so you understand the path she chooses. That there is no instant fame worth the dragging of your name. And if that's what you think, you've a lot to learn about the kind of facts the mob can handle and the kind that it refuses. You've a lot to learn about the news and all its many uses. Guess you've yet to learn the truth the news will serve as fruit from which they've squeezed out all the juices. And we all eat the husk and just pretend it's full of nutrients and isn't really useless. But the jaws of our ability to yield accountability are absolutely toothless. So don't you kid yourself that any lips are being loosened. They won't ever tell us where the bodies are or show us where the proof is. It's on you to recognize the lechery our president so regularly oozes. It's on you to muster up some honesty and ask yourself how Biden won your trust, but it's America that loses. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises.
My lips, brand new taxes, starving all the billionaires and neutering their Visa Maxes. Topple Congress off their axis, mobilize the homeless, give them axes, call it praxis. Chop a couple limbs off the legislative branches. We'll show you the difference between air as a human right and guaranteed oxygen access. Octogenarians who barely know what day it is are culling countless citizens while sitting on a dais made of ignorance that was built on the graves of the slaves made to labor for its self-declared significance. And all to build a Congress full of millionaires who make their fortunes insider trading while they shit on all the indigent. So I got a bone to pick with our leaders, and I'll start with the ligaments. Pick right through the muscle, dig the marrow out, and serve it to the unhoused millions living in their minivans or watching their belongings get evicted from their tenement. I have a dream where we breach the walls of Congress and just let them in. And what happens next will survive in only text, cause there won't be any evidence. There will only be that heavy kind of feeling that pervades a space where there has been a reckoning and you can feel its remnants. Let any man who enters seeking power know that those who came before him suffocated on their eminence. That there once was a seal on the wall, but we quartered it and scattered all the pieces that it might prevent its semblance. And so we end the great experiment
We'll take all your billions, leave you 2 coins for the ferryman. Leave you drifting on a Dutchman, floating derelict among the wretched seraphim. For holy is the hand that wiped the land clean of those who pose as gentlemen. That's my time, honey, cue the thunderclap and strike the theremin. And so we end the great experiment. Give you 2 coins for the ferryman.
Welcome, everyone. This is the Politics of Survival, and I am your host, Tara Reade, and I have one of my favorite people with me today, and she is so amazing, and I'm so, not that I need to be proud of her because she's just an amazing, but like I am so proud of her because she made the jump to go to Moscow, Russia, and pursue her career, and she is very successful. A wonderful journalist, always boots on the ground, always, you know, if you want to know about things, you go to Feast channel on Telegram or watch the Convo Couch with her and Pasta. So without further ado, the beautiful and amazing Fiorella Isabel. Hello, Fee.
Hi. I didn't need that introduction, but thank you.
I'm so happy for you that you have gone from, you know, I mean, the Convo Couch is quite successful, has a huge following. And then now you've even gone a step further and you're working for RT International. So tell the audience who may not know how they can find you on RT and when you started.
Right. So I've been here 2 months. It's going to be 3 months by near the end of September. And I am working the news desk and also corresponding as well. So I was doing a lot of the anchoring, and then I'm going to be back and forth with that and corresponding. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I'm used to more corresponding type of stuff, but the news desk has been fun. I like the interviews. I like the news aspect of it because I'm always usually aware of what we're going to talk about because I do the Convo Couch. So if I don't talk about it before, I'll talk about it after. So there's a lot of intersections happening. That's not the right word, but there's a lot of this stuff happening that they kind of merge together a lot of the things I talk about anyway. So it's pretty cool. And everybody's been really great to work with. They're very nice. They've been very helpful. I think it would have been very difficult to come to Russia without having the help to, do like basic bureaucratic things. Those are things I'm not good at, like just paperwork stuff. It's just insane. That sort of thing. So I'm glad that they were able to help out a lot with that. And so, it's been great. And Moscow is really nice. It's a very nice city. I came during the summer. It's starting literally September 1st. Like the weather has drastically changed. In a couple days ago, it was like 80 degrees, 75, 79. It's like 50. It's going to go down to like in the 40s already. Like I'm not prepared whatsoever. I have like no winter clothes because I was like, I am going to go back before it gets really cold and bring more of my winter clothes as well. But like, it's just been, I didn't expect the temperature to change that drastically, but I guess I'm told that happens here. So it's time to go try to get some warmer clothes. But yeah, it's not like super, super cold, but it's like in the 50s already. So that's winter in LA and Florida. So this is, light here. And to be frank, it's not that cold right now. They have really good insulation in homes and stuff. And the heaters automatically, the gas heaters turn on automatically, I think, sometime this month.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's very cheap for electricity, heating, water, all of that. It's very cheap on that aspect.
So you're not
Whereas
going to
like
be dealing with what Europe's dealing with.
not even close. No, I mean, even in the summer, I for the AC and stuff, you don't pay like you pay a fraction of what people pay for air conditioning in the States. I mean, it is insanely cheap. So it's great on that aspect. Yeah.
That's very cool. Well, I had Pasta on the show, as you know, the other day, and he told me this really cool story about you guys, about how you met, about how you were in this restaurant and you were pouring soy sauce, refilling the soy, and then
he lied.
Long excess came on together forever and that kind of thing. And I thought that was so sweet and heartwarming. Yeah.
Yeah, none of that happened, but it's hilarious that he tells that
I know.
story.
He told me, I said, hey, what's something fun I could tease you with? And he's like, he gave me that story. So he said it annoys you.
It does, because it literally didn't happen. What happened was that I was a Bernie supporter back then, and I had a friend, and she was like, oh, she knew how much I talked about politics all the time. So she was like, oh my God, this guy, he's like a Bernie supporter too. And like, it was like, oh, hi. Like, and he was an actor and I was in this industry at that time. And so it was basically, it was like, oh, okay, you're an actor and you like Bernie. And so we just started talking, and a lot of people were starting their own content at that point because as you know now, I mean, a lot of people know at this point, but Hollywood is just it's just so much propaganda and so much advertising, and there's a lot of typecasting there, and there's a lot of just a sexual like exploitation, and it's just very tedious, and it's very like, I think it's just very destructive to a lot of people who go there thinking that it's going to be something very fulfilling and full of art and full of like storytelling. And I think so a lot of people started doing their own content production, and eventually I was doing a lot of activism, a lot of political stuff, and then I was writing as well. And so then I wanted to do some sort of like content about what was going on in LA, because there was so much homelessness and there was a lot of wealth disparity. And I was working with one organization in particular that did a lot of activism with housing and the unhoused. And so basically I just wanted to like talk about what was happening and in the streets and the movement and that sort of thing. And Pasta was like, yeah, we should start a YouTube channel. And so we got together and just became business partners eventually and just started the channel. So that's kind of how it happened.
It's fantastic. I mean, your show is fantastic. The Convo Couch, that's how I first came to know you. And I said this to Pasta, and I really mean this. What kind of sparked, it's interesting because like I've been on a lot of shows, but I haven't necessarily sparked a friendship, like an ongoing communication. But with you, I just felt this kinship, and we immediately kind of, connected. And so it's been nice to have someone to talk to about politics and what's going on. And so many of my friends are so propagandized, like they would never dream of going to Moscow and things like that. So it's nice that to talk to someone like-minded, who's open-minded, who's interested in traveling, who's curious and has wonder in the world. But one of the things I said to Pasta too was that I appreciated the way you both covered my story and allowed me dignity and covered it objectively. And that meant a lot to me and always will. So thank you.
Yeah. And I think more people should have done that, because of the fact that, first of all, it's you're one of many, unfortunately. And Joe Biden is no saint. And I mean, it was just this whole media shutout, right? Of like not talking about this guy who's going to be president and trying to paint him as an innocent grandfather. You could just tell, like, from multiple testimonies, multiple videos. And it's so hard in these cases sometimes to say, oh, somebody is guilty or someone isn't. But at the very least, like what you were offering and the testimonies you had and the evidence you had, I mean, it was just the fact that people completely ignored you. I thought that was criminal at that point, with such a person who has political power, and of course became our president. And now we're seeing the consequences of that. And and we're at the point where we know that presidents are very limited in their power, in the sense of their figures, their puppets in some ways. We know that there's apparatus behind this, but they pick the right people to fill that position. They don't pick somebody that's going to oppose the status quo, that's going to oppose the establishment. And they know what they're doing in that sense. In order to be somebody of that political power and that political will to have really been the architect of the current problems we're experiencing now.
And the warmongering. I mean, he was the architect.
The warmongering.
All of that.
You have to be that. You have to be a monster to have this sort of position at this point. They don't put good people in those positions. And so that's what we have to understand.
That's a very good point. That's a really good point. And, one of the things that I admire about, Craig or Pasa was saying that he considers himself like a citizen journalist, but you're trained and educated, and your journalism is expanding and growing. And now with this experience with RT International, I'm sure it's going to take you to new heights with fulfilling that dream. And I think it's really good to see you bring forth a different narrative, because our lens is so limited right now and so propagandized. It's really difficult to get other voices in, particularly like all the election coverage of in other countries, as well as our own, that you and Pasta have done. And I wanted to kind of ask you about, now that you've been in Moscow, because I know our listeners, our audience wanted to hear what it's like. There's a lot of Russophobia, as you know, right now from the West, hysteria that's very negative towards Russians. And today, I told you just before we came on that it was announced that the EU has decided to break its agreement with Russia about visas. They're going to make it very difficult and expensive for Russian tourists to travel around Europe, which is just, it's ridiculous. But I wanted to see, if the same bias applies to Americans going to Moscow. Like, have you experienced any of that, or how are they treating you and that sort of thing?
Yeah, no. I mean, people have been really nice. I mean, some people get frustrated, when you don't speak the language, more so with that they don't speak it. They get frustrated. I haven't really experienced any negativity towards me. In fact, there's more of an interest of, what are you doing here? Why are you here as an American? What's wrong with you? Like, why would you be here right now? Rather than like, oh, like Yankee go home. And that is what Americans experience in a lot of parts of the global South, because of the exploitation and the imperialism that certain countries in, like, say, Nicaragua but it's mostly from the political aspect of not towards American people as much as the arrogance of the American government. And that's something that every single country that has been placed as being adversarial to the United States says. Daniel Ortega, in his inauguration, he said, we love the American people. It's the American government we have an issue with. And I think that applies to so many people and in countries that are painted as adversarial. People don't hate Americans here. They don't even hate the American culture. In fact, they still have a very positive view overall, at least in Moscow, about the West, is particularly the United States. They listen to American music. There's a lot of places that, whether it's restaurants or bars, that have American names. They love American, like, karaoke. There's so much love for American movies and Hollywood. In fact, I mean, the Russians are very, very, very fond of film. And Russian film has a lot of history as well, but they really do love American films and stuff. And so I think that this idea that they hate Americans and they want death to all Americans, whether it's Russians, whether it's Iranians, whether it's Syrians or Chinese, that's just not the case. It's our government making us feel like these people hate us because they don't want us to understand that they're the problem. And these people simply know that they're the problem. They know that Americans aren't really, that Americans are propagandized, and Americans, there's this idea that Americans are dumb because there's a lot of miseducation in our country, as we've seen displayed. People don't even know where Taiwan is. So that sort of thing, and that is true. Like when I visited Europe itself, that was true. Making fun of Americans for being loud and for being self-centered, and I think that is a product of our creation, meaning it's done on purpose, through miseducation, through distraction, through entertainment.
And
We're distracted.
And through the propaganda of American exceptionalism, like there's this view by Americans, this arrogance when we go, and Joe Biden is the epitome of that. Like when he was discussing firing, back a few years ago, firing the Ukrainian, I think it was like one of the lead attorneys, who, by the way, was investigating Hunter Biden, because Hunter Biden had his, was getting paid like $50,000 a month by Burisma. And three grown adult children of some of the representatives, Nancy Pelosi, I think, Dianne Feinstein, was it Dianne Feinstein or another one, and then Joe Biden's son, all had jobs with Burisma. And it's amazing. Like on one hand, they put down other European nations, America does, or Russia, but it's exploiting it at the same time. It's bizarre and it's hypocritical. And of course, when I brought up to you about the banning of the Russian tourists, like trying to make it very difficult for Russian tourists to go to Europe, I mean, that's unheard of. That's ridiculous. I mean, what are your thoughts on banning the tourists?
Yeah. So if we replace Russians with Jews, wouldn't the world be appalled and have a problem? I mean, haven't we gone through this already? I mean, it's not even just that. They've been destroying every ounce of their culture. They've been telling people, like in Ukraine, that they can't speak Russian. And then, of course, Europe has done, and both the United States have destroyed the lives of many athletes that are Russian, ballet dancers, musicians, artists, as if it's their fault. They've also just done things like bans Russian literature in some places, burning books. Like, what is this? This is an attack on an entire culture, which is the reason Russia has stood up to the West and NATO, because it's almost like if they allowed this to happen, it just, that would be the end of Russia. And I think that it was something that wasn't easy for Russia to do. A lot of people were really split on this issue, because even though they might support their country, they didn't want the sanctions. They didn't want the economic backlash that happened immediately after, Putin's military intervention into Ukraine. And I still call it that, because that's what it was initially. I mean, he was asked by the people in the Donbass for years. He was criticized for not going in sooner. And I think a lot of it had to do with the timing. A lot of it had to do with, okay, like there's no point. This is the point of no return now. We can't not go in there. Because now, of course, China is playing a bigger role. 8 years ago, a lot of people, I don't think we knew what we know now. I think there's more of an awareness, and there's more of an opposition to the West as well. So I think that also the timing had to be correct. But unfortunately, in these 8 years, 14,000 people in the Donbass have been killed, and some have been living under just awful conditions. And if you watch any of the documentaries on RT that are there, countless of them, or if you watch Ukraine on Fire, if you watch any of the media that has been totally censored in the West, you will see that. You will at least see this other perspective. There's a reason they're not letting you see that. If they had nothing to lose.
Yeah, it's really stunning about trying to erase 1,000 years of history and culture and scientific advancement, and the first people in space, and all the cultural achievements and artistic achievements of Russia. It's ridiculous trying to rewrite that history, like Stephen Bandera, trying to whitewash him and make him like he was a good guy when he was a Nazi collaborator, and was responsible for killing, I don't know, 33,000 plus Jewish and other people during that time. So it's bizarre. Like Vogue, I had a conversation with someone that Vogue magazine was trying to rehabilitate Stephen Bandera's image, and it was stunning to see that in corporate press. But yet I guess we shouldn't be surprised at the amount of
it's as American as apple pie. We've completely helped Nazis. I mean, since World War II, and like, I mean, we continuously did it. We continuously covered for them, you know, and they have infiltrated our own government. I mean, that is a fact. That is that. I mean, that is what was it? Is it Operation? I forget. I don't know why I'm blanking out, but it was a particular operation. I think it was Operation Paperclip. But it was basically they when I talk about fascism, when I say fascism, I mean the people in suits, the people with power that manipulate and move the pieces to manipulate the rest of the world. And it's not like you don't have control as a person, is that they do everything they can to take away your people's power, and they also psychologically make people feel like they can't fight against this evil. And I think there's like, you have to be very careful to, you know, when we talk about the establishment, when we talk about the elite, the predator class, I like to call them, because there's nothing elite about them. They think they are above everybody else, but when we talk about them, you know, in this cabal of people and the you know, these people, the globalists, we have to be careful to understand that these people come together because they have vested interests, and they're a 1% or a fraction of a 1%. They're very powerful people, but that doesn't mean that you don't have control, and that doesn't mean that there's no opposition to that. And I think there is opposition, not just in nation states, but within nation states, within different groups within nation states. There's oppositions here. You can't say all of Russia is one thing, all of China is one thing, all of the United States is one thing, because as we know, in the United States, we have completely different points of views all over the United States. So you can't just say everybody else is going to think the same, and then they don't. And that's what you find out when you live in Russia, is you find people that are supportive of Putin, you find people that aren't crazy about him, but you do find a lot of people that do understand that the West has done a lot of damage, and they know their history way more than we know our history, which is why we're so propagandized.
Right, because of the lack of education and all of that that's happening right now. I wanted to also mention, I had done some segments about Daria Dugina, who was assassinated, according to FSB, by the Ukrainian SBU, and her car was you know, exploded, and she was a young, very successful, renowned journalist, and also a colleague and friend of some of our friends, right, in Moscow. So you were there when that happened. What was it like for you as an American to observe kind of the reactions, and then to see right after this happened, to see the Western media just sort of pile on, calling Alexander Dugin, her father, who was a philosopher and politician, called him a fascist, and then kind of smeared her, almost like trying to justify this assassination? I mean, what was your perspective being there in Moscow?
People were very upset here. People were very, you know, touched. They were very heartbroken. It went beyond the war narrative. This is like an attack on a civilian. This is an attack based on this caricature that the West has created of Alexander Dugin being Putin's brain, the voice behind Putin, all like Putin's major influence, which is entirely false, because Alexander Dugin has never even talked to Putin. Like this is, a lot of the things that were said were not true. He was actually his politics at that point, when his politics were focused mainly on fighting what was going on at least 8 years ago in the Donbass, and so was his daughters. So when they referred to these subhuman, inhuman people, they were talking about fascists who were murdering people. They weren't talking about like Ukrainians in general, saying like all Ukrainians are this. So when Daria Dugina was like talking about, you know, that there's a video that went around circulating, and they're saying, oh, she's a fascist, a good Nazi is dead. And they were just celebrating. A lot of people that consider themselves leftist and anti-imperialists, especially the you know, the progressive left, what's left of the Bernie left and all of that, they were cheering on her death like it was just like the greatest thing, and flat out calling her a Nazi. But nobody could answer me when I asked what exactly is so fascist about Alexander Dugin and his daughter. And first of all, even if you could prove that he was, what was his daughter have to do with it? And it's just so many things wrong with it. And they it's funny because they, you know, they say they oppose the establishment, they say they are trying to change things for the better, but they repeat the same talking points that the intelligence apparatus does, that the
The US
mainstream
and
media
British
does.
intelligence apparatus, you know, like Bellingcat, you know, right?
Yeah.
Elliot Higgins,
Yeah.
who's MI6, American CIA, Michael McFaul, you know, all of them who
Yep.
are embedded in American and British intelligence and trying to form this narrative. Yeah, as you know, I had Elliot Higgins go after me last week because I was, you know, saying how horrible this was, a terrorist act, actually, what happened to Daria Dugina. And,
Right. That's what they
received a lot
say
of pushback.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in your mind, because you also have talked to Ava Bartlett, and so have I, and she's on that same kill list that Daria was on. So the really shocking thing that happened too was on that website, they crossed out her name, and in English it means liquidated. They put liquidated, which was it was nauseating to read that. And then, you know, Ava Bartlett's on the kill list, and she's still doing reporting on the ground from Donbass, which is really scary. The hotel she was at was bombed. I mean, watching this from your perspective, working in Moscow, what are some of the thoughts and conversations that are happening around kind of the war leaking out into Europe and into other places, right? And into Russia.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that a lot of people are starting to see through the narrative, and I think that's happening in the West finally. A lot of it is happening in the United States too, where people are starting to see. And I think even before Daria and the incident, there was a lot of unraveling with a lot of these stories where, you know, people who were denying that there were actual fascists, paramilitary fascists in Ukraine. Because again, I have to stress this, when the United States talks about fascism right now, they're trying to call Trump supporters fascists, right?
Right.
That's not a fascist. That's just somebody that's right wing. You disagree with them. They whatever you want to say, they're not fascists. Could there be some fascists in the group? Of course, there could be some fascists. But when I talk about fascists, I talk about paramilitary, gun-toting, I want to kill all of you, I have murdered people in cold blood, fascists. Like, I want to eliminate a certain group of people. Fascists, Nazis, like literally proud to be Nazis, have gloated about it, literally. And of course, you know, recently Alex Rubinstein just put out this piece for the Gray Zone, you know, talking about how the Disney invited a literal Nazi, and they covered up his Nazi tattoo. And but this is what they do. This is what the media does. You know, they'll invite Zelensky to these award shows. They'll make it like this is like these people are innocent. And it's not that people are saying that every single Ukrainian is a Nazi, but that the military, the military apparatus is controlled by these factions, and that's something you can't get away from. And so when you see that happen here, when you saw like the reaction towards Daria Dugina and everything that was happening, it was like people just felt that it was an attack on Russians, because it was an attack that was completely done because of this creation of Alexander Dugin as a certain caricature of Putin. It was because of that, a lot of the Western media and how they portrayed Alexander Dugin. It was because of this fake narrative, and that extended to his daughter. And that is very criminal, because it's not based in reality, and you have these people running with it. But it is something that they have been programming Americans to do. You could go back to January 6th when Ashley Babbitt was murdered, and she was a Trump supporter, and she was murdered literally in cold blood. And, you know, and people were arguing with me saying that it was great that she was murdered because she was a Nazi. And I'm like, she was not a Nazi. Like, I thought you guys were against cops.
She was a veteran.
She was a veteran. And these are the same people that were saying all cops are bastards. And yet they were cheering the FBI when they murdered somebody in cold blood. They could have taken her to custody. They could have done a numerous amount of things.
Yeah, she was unarmed.
But it was just, she was unarmed. It was this cheering of it that I didn't like. And I literally lost friends for saying that. And they called me a white supremacist sympathizer for not being okay with her being shot. And that was the moment when I was like, okay, yeah, they've literally succeeded in brainwashing all these people, because this is where we're going to go from now. And then, people started turning on their family members, calling the FBI. And now, when it happened with Daria Dugino, we could just tell that this was going to happen, because whatever they tell them to believe, they believe it. And what's happened is that the quote unquote sectors of the independent media, the progressive media, have been co-opted by the same type of NATO narrative, and they regurgitate it when they don't really oppose it. They just rebrand it. And so that's what's happening. That's what it is. And there's very few media that actually tell the truth and actually have an oppositional narrative, because they're either censored, taken down, or vilified or maligned and discredited in some way.
Yeah, it's really been stunning to see, also to see the narrative unraveling the way it is. Like, for instance, the Ukrainian official that lied about war crimes by Russians and was fired. So finally she, I mean, at least that happened, but the amount of untruth that is happening, and there's no accurate coverage, and the accurate coverage that does come from people like yourself, from Ava Bartlett, from, Alina Lip, from Wyatt Reade, that are on boots on the ground in the Donbass region, as well. Those reporters get death threats. Like Patrick Lancaster had his whole family threatened. He got sanctioned, he got demonetized. Same thing, Wyatt Reade got demonetized. So the tactics the West use to cling to this narrative is, when there's real journalism, they'll, try to shut it down. And I know you and Pasta went through your own struggles with Convo Couch when you were, talking about things people didn't want to talk about, right? They went after, the monetization and things like that, and censoring.
Yeah. I mean, that's been happening for a while, and it's gotten a lot worse now, but it was going to happen. And this is why we have a Rockfin, and we started focusing on getting people towards Rockfin, and we continue to do that, because I mean, you can't rely on YouTube when they literally just censor entire networks, right? Like RT, when they if an entire network can't fight YouTube, there's really little chance of anybody else, because they're not operating on good faith. They're not operating based on rules that are fair and just. They're operating based on what the narrative control. And this is what really irks me when people say we have, you work for Russia state affiliated media, you do what Putin tells you. Putin doesn't tell me to do anything. I have a lot of jurisdiction as to what I want to say. I have made corrections. I have made changes. I don't just, read whatever they tell me to read. When it comes to that, and when it comes to a lot of the corresponding, if there are videos and packages, I write them. So I mean, there's there's a lot of things that are said that I think are completely false. But also, when RT, for example, covers a story, whether it's Palestine and Israel, they are very careful to show both sides, even if personally a lot of the journalists feel a certain way about it, which, I mean, a lot of us are pro-Palestinian, and I'm speaking for myself now, but specifically me, yeah. I obviously, I don't believe in the Israeli occupation. I think what's being done is genocide. And obviously I don't say that because they're trying to show they'll have an Israeli person on, they'll have a Palestinian person on, but but it's like, everybody has an inherent bias, like I can't go around saying that, I'm going to be 100%, objective at 100% of the time, because as a person, I believe there is wrong and there's right. So, but when I'm working in the context of, when I have to interview people, I'm going to have to interview people I don't like. I'm going to have to interview people that, and you can push back against those people, right? You can literally ask certain questions, but But to say that, that we have free media in the United States really irks me, because it's like, no, we don't, because the media is literally an arm of the government. It is a tool of the government. It was supposed to be a tool of the people. And they basically flipped that and turned it into a tool of the government. And it's just straight up propaganda that, Twitter is on paper a private company, but we know that they sit in meetings with the government. So does Facebook and Meta. And Mark Zuckerberg has just admitted that because the FBI told him to, things we already knew, he finally admitted that the FBI told him to suppress the stories about Hunter Biden's laptop. That's what they're telling you. Imagine what they're not telling you. And that's what people need to understand. You can lie to yourself all you want and say, yes, we have free press and we live in, these companies are private and they can do whatever they want. And if you don't like it, you don't have to participate. It's like, okay, but they're not private. They're merged with the government. And that's the definition of fascism. And so that's where the United States is headed. And the West, the UK and the EU are headed in most of these countries, because that's exactly what's happening. It's a merger of corporate and the state. And so you can say that, Russia's still state affiliated media all you want, but at the end of the day, we're the ones that are persecuting and prosecuting journalists, particularly Julian Assange, for exposing this very thing, this very nefarious affair that is within the military industrial intelligence apparatus. And I mean, why would you pursue him and try to prosecute him and give him almost 200 years in jail for being a journalist, right?
And a publisher, yeah. I mean, and he's not even a U.S. citizen, and they're trying to punish him under the Espionage Act. He's Australian anyway. Not only that, but then all the malfeasance that has come to light about them planning to assassinate him, the U.S. intelligence, cooperating with British intelligence, and also in talking about having a shootout in the Britain streets. It's unbelievable. Like, that alone should have gotten it. And then recording conversations between him and his attorney, which is highly illegal internationally and under international law. And for that alone, it should also be dropped. I don't know. You bring up a lot of really good points. I know my experience with RT has always been very positive, and I had complete freedom. Everything I said, I was doing opinion pieces, so I was doing writing as well. And my podcast was originally produced by them. But I had complete freedom. They never censored me at all. In fact, Lee Camp, who worked with them for almost 8 years, said it was the freest he's ever been. Like, you could never find a media company in the United States or in the West that would allow you that much creative freedom to do your work, whatever that is. And so they're sorely missed. They're censored here, but Great Britain went a step further and they pulled their license, which I still think is illegal. Like, I don't even know how they're justifying.
And they sanctioned some of the people that work for RT, some of the presenters, and they go and they get the media, which of course the British media is one of the worst, to hound their families and who have nothing to do with it, to threaten to fire their family members. I mean, this is how awful the West has been. And for what? Because somebody has a job and they're doing their job and they're presenting the news in an outlet that you don't like. Like, I mean, that's ridiculous. And the United States has no foot to stand on when it comes to press freedom, when it comes to anything remotely about justice or anything like that. And that's the government. And, and I can ardently say I oppose the government because it's not representative of the people. And that was the whole point of the Declaration of Independence, was to oppose a government that was tyrannical. And a lot of people have lost a notion of that, right? And of course, the United States was created on the backs of slaves and on exploitation and on imperialism. But there was a lot of things that were brought by from the Enlightenment, from the Renaissance, from these ideas of liberty and justice that you could still grab and say, okay, these were the right ideas. Right. And you could take those ideas, but those ideas are gone in the United States as it exists now. And the people who call themselves patriots need to understand that patriotism is supporting the people, your brothers and sisters, your neighbors, against a tyrannical government. It's not supporting your government all the time when they're wrong. And there has to be some understanding of that, because the only people that can really hold the US accountable are the American citizens, really, and in the way it needs to be done.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on every point. And, I wanted to, and that brought me to my next kind of conversation point I wanted to ask you about. And that is, you're there in Moscow every day, your day-to-day life. And I know our audience is curious, like, what are some of the big myths that have now been busted open for you, being, you know, because you lived in the West and have been propagandized just like the rest of us, or they tried to, you've been able to rise above it. But so what are some of the big myth busters you'd like to get out there to the audience? Just kind of like everyday life stuff.
Yeah. Well, you already gave one up, the fact that they don't hate Americans. So that one is an entire myth. The fact that Russia is a very backward country, that it's poor and dirty, no. They, from the moment I got to the airport, it was the most efficient airport I've ever been in. The thing that really stuck out for me was that the little suitcase carts are free. You don't have to pay for them. I like that because I had suitcases at that point because I'm literally moving here. And so that was nice. And then the airport, like everything was super clean and it had a process. There wasn't like these crazy lines. I'm coming from these airport chaos in the States, and I go to that, I'm like, wow, this is amazing restaurants, amazing like food in the airport, things I have never seen in the States, like craft type of places, like not corporate, just very, very like different. Like I was so like, wow, this is like absolutely amazing. Then outside of course of that, in Moscow itself, you have the best public transportation I've ever experienced. I'm told China is even better, but I haven't been there yet. So Moscow has like the most efficient trains. If you miss a train 2 minutes later or less, you get another one. It just, you can go anywhere
there right now.
You don't need a car at all. The Ubers that, you know, Uber left, obviously. So there's another company that took over, and that company has the same, you have that app and you can just, it's the same way, order a taxi. You can also like hail taxis, but most people are using the app now because it's easier, and you can pay cash or you can pay on your card. It's very efficient, very easy. The buses, I even rode a bus. I haven't ever been on an American bus because they're just not efficient. I think I've used the school buses, and I've used like I think like a college bus once, but never in a bus in the United States, only like trams and stuff in San Francisco. And I've used the subway in New York and stuff. But I mean, compare the subways to Moscow compared to a subway in New York. I mean, it's just hilarious. I mean, they're works of art here. They look like pieces of architecture from different eras. It is absolutely beautiful, clean. They have internet, they have Wi-Fi, not a sign of a single rat. I mean, everything is just so pristine. The streets are clean. People are very careful too. There's trash bins everywhere, so you can throw away your trash. People here are very much enjoy summer because they get to go outside. Very family oriented. There's a lot of that's one of the things I've noticed with like Moscow and Latin America, Russia in general and Latin America is very family oriented. And I saw that's those similarities as well. It's not really a religious place. I think people think it's more religious. I think it's more of tradition and culture, that the Orthodox churches are there and they're very beautiful, and it's nice visiting them and seeing, you know, I love like architecture and stuff. So if there's a church, I always go because I find it very interesting. I'm not religious at all, but the architecture itself, and the food, coming here, it tasted different. Everything tasted different. And I'm thinking maybe it's all the GMO stuff that I'm used to. And I usually eat pretty healthy.
Banned GMOs, is that right? They banned Monsanto.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they did. And in the States, like I would eat pretty healthy. I mean, living in LA, there was a lot of more options than there are in other parts of the States, but still, things taste different. And they have a lot more different kinds of food than I thought. Like they have food from all over the world that is very surprising. The pizza here is way better than it ever was in Chicago. I'm so sorry. I will send a picture next time.
Kid is listening from Hardlands Media. The pizza wars have begun. So you're saying Moscow has better pizza than Chicago? Let's get it on the record, Fee.
Yes, Moscow has definitely better pizza than Chicago. I mean, you know what it is? It's the bread.
Sorry, buddy.
So the Moscow and Russians are very big on bread, and specifically rye, and they have all kinds of bread here. And the bread from the pizza is just like phenomenal. I mean, I'm the person that throws away the crust all the time of pizza. And if you've ever eaten pizza around me, you know this. I don't eat the crust.
Yeah.
But here I've eaten the crust, and that's just so rare. And I'm like, wow. The only other place I've done that is Italy, because Italy has the best pizza in the world, period, hands down.
Course, yeah.
So, but like, yeah, like I was like, wow, the pizza here is good. They have really good Georgian food, which has
what's Georgian
this
food?
their
Really,
type of
to describe the audience.
It's
I've had
like,
it, but let's describe it.
it's okay. It's like a lot of bread and cheese, and they have like hummus and stuff too. It's hard to describe. You kind of just have to eat it. It's so hard to describe, but it's kind of like I forgot how to say it because I don't want to say it wrong, but they have like this version of this pizza that has like cheese and then egg, and then you like mix that up together, and then you take the bread and you dip it in and you eat it.
I've
And
had that before. Isn't that wild? That's so, and they put it in the center of the thing, right? And it kind of like cooks at the heat of it. Yeah.
It's not obviously, guys, that is fattening and carby, so don't have it every day, but like it's very, very good. They have a lot of Middle Eastern food here as well. A lot of that Italian food here is good. They have Mexican food. My friend took me to a Mexican place and it was very good. I was very surprised. And so they have a lot of different things here that I didn't expect them to have. Also, the train system for going further out from the city, from the center of Moscow, not the metro, but like towards the suburban areas, those are very efficient as well. You could get anywhere. And I still haven't taken like the Trans-Siberian, the Siberian Railway. The Siberian Railway, and that one is I goes all the way to China, and now it's more modernized. There's bathrooms and stuff. Before, you wouldn't be able to like take a shower and stuff for like a long time, and so people were like not keen on it. But I think if you pay a little more, you can. But just going back to the neighborhood trains real quick, like I took a train to St. Petersburg, and they literally give you food. It's so nice. There's like bathrooms. You can go walk around. I mean, it's just insane.
Nice,
I mean, we don't have this in the States. We don't have any.
We don't have
like the Amtrak is the closest thing, and it's like not that nice, and it's super expensive. And and just flying. I also flew. I flew back from St. Petersburg because I wanted to try both methods of transportation. And it was very quick, very efficient, just super like no issue. I just haven't had an issue, and I don't see the police. I mean, I see some people that are like part of the, Secret Service. They're around, but they don't mess with people. They don't. I just haven't seen that at all. And the supermarkets have shelves stocked. I don't know. People thought like Russia was like, crippling. People are out, like the malls. I put a video up of a mall, and people were like, "That's fake." I'm like, no, it's real. I haven't seen malls like that in the United States. Like, and I've been to very nice malls in the United States. I've not seen those malls. Like, the way they are here are
nicer
insane,
than
and
the
they're
Beverly
huge.
Center and all that. The gum is.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, the other myth is like that Russia is like this commie paradise. No, there's a lot of capitalism here. I mean, there's a lot of love for that. Yeah, and I think that's where the westernization comes from too.
They're starting to, because of the sanctions, it's kind of forced them to do their own innovation with clothing and design and jewelry. And I think that's kind of wonderful in a way, isn't it? To see Russian brands instead of European.
Oh yeah. The innovation is, and the resilience of Russians is very nice. Turning the Starbucks into Stars Coffee, turning the McDonald's into it tastes good, period. Or I think that's what it's called, it's tasty, period. And just turning they're into Russian makeup, Russian clothing, because they don't have access to some of the UK brands and some of the American brands. There's still some European, like Italian and stuff, but as far as like the H&M, Zara, all that, IKEA, they all pulled out. But they, like I said, there's resilience, and people are figuring out ways to make it work and stuff. And yeah, of course, Russians miss like Victoria's Secret and all these other, H&M and all these other brands. But at the same time, is it going to be a make or break you? No. And what's really smart is the way they were able to keep 80%, for example, of the people that worked at the Starbucks stayed to reopen as the other brand, which
great.
is Stars
Their
Coffee.
employment. Yeah, and I had read that I had read that Vladimir Putin gave a boost to pensions and to benefits when they got their surplus, which, you're not seeing any of that in the United States or European nations, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of things too, like that are kind of, I think, remains of the USSR. Transportation is extremely it's cheap, sometimes free. And then when it comes to healthcare, that's also like a state type of thing. Obviously, parts of the media obviously certain things are, like I said, the things at the airport, some of them, there's like certain sectors that still remain part of like from the Soviet Union era, this idea of that providing for people. And I think that's something that we used to have more of in the United States, right? Like Social Security. I mean, not that we don't have it, but it's pretty much almost going to be non-existent.
No one can live it. Yeah, no one can live on it. Yeah, you can't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't pay your rent on it.
I wanted to also mention there's a trip, if you get a chance, because you love architecture, that I was told to take when I go sometime to Russia, which I hope to someday. But apparently there's medieval towns right around Moscow. There's like 5 or 6 where you can go and travel and look at all the medieval, it's pre-Soviet Union even. So it's all these pristine medieval churches and structures and houses. So if you want to check that out, it might be worthwhile. I'll send you the link of the tour of the way that you can do it efficiently. But I wanted to check in with Reade. First of all, I want to thank INN, Independent News Network, for helping me with my podcast. As everyone knows, it was taken down and censored by Google and Spotify, and now it's back up independently because of INN and Indy and Reade. So Reade, thank you, who's doing the producing. And Reade, are there questions and comments that came through for Fee? Okay. Are there any speaking of
Indie News Network, Indie Left News asks, how has Russia reacted to Gorbachev's death?
Oh, yeah. Very good. Very good, Fee. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I could just say something quick. I mean, it's kind of split. Overall, there is not as positive of a light in comparison to how the West has covered him. And even if people are not, pro-communist, they still recognize that he did a lot of damage. There was people starved. He let the West in, and the West came in and started trying to control and dominate Russia. And that's something that is always going to be in the back of people's minds. But the Russians that are more sympathetic to it say, well, this was also part of the diplomacy and being a victim of the West. The communist factions here very much, we need to undo everything he did. He ruined Russia, and he made communism look like a failure. And so there's that aspect of it. But overall, it's just definitely more of like, he was a historical figure of this time, and he will be remembered as that. But he isn't somebody that, they have necessarily the fondest memories, particularly because of the policies he pushed or he allowed in that led to the suffering of so many people in Russia. And that's something that's still sort of in the minds of people, obviously less of the younger generations, but in the West, I mean, they're revering him, and they're, saying all these positive things. And that makes one think like, okay, like, obviously, you're pushing a certain narrative here. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Thanks. Yeah. Reade, any other comments or questions for Fee?
The Convo Couch asks, hey, where's the looks and humor guy of the Convo Couch at?
Oh my God.
Who could that be? Fee? Who could that be?
I don't know. Who
I don't
could that
know.
possibly be?
Who could it possibly be? We feel your presence, Pasta. We feel it all around us. It's like good manicotti, right? Anyway.
Yeah, well,
But he's vegan
I
now, so he's not
don't.
even doing that. So okay, what any others?
Yes. One asks, what are the best differences between Russia and here? Jara asks that in Spanish, which I had to translate real quick.
Good for
We
you.
could have just.
Yeah, I know, right?
I think that the public transportation thing, I wish we had more of that in the West. Definitely. I think it would alleviate a lot of things. The people are a little bit more laid back here. Like, things don't really start till like 10 o'clock in the morning, whereas in the States, most people start their work at 6 or 7. So that's kind of nice. They're more family oriented. I like that aspect, that people place emphasis in spending time with their families, and that sort of thing. Arts, I think that there's attention to the arts, but it's more commercialized in the States. I feel like here it's a little bit more rooted in history. There's a lot of attention paid to the history. It's hard to separate the history from Russia because there's so much that went on here. So I think those are the things. And the pride of being Russian is not in the nationalist sense of what we think of nationalism. It's more of like a pride in maintaining their sovereignty and maintaining an allegiance to their culture, who they are, and not as much as like saying they're better than others, but being proud to have gone through everything they've gone through. There are people that have gone through a lot, and so that resonates in everything that
they lost
they
27
have
million
and they
people,
do.
right? In World War II.
Yeah.
So that's a whole generation.
Yeah. So
yeah,
those are
and I
some
think
aspects.
that what we're taught. Do you find, Fee, that the history we were taught, now that you're looking through the lens of more of the East, is a very different history, isn't it? How we're taught.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that started too when, especially being in Latin America. I mean, and I kind of knew but it seeps into what you're taught even in Latin America too, because there are certain people you don't talk about because of the indoctrination of the West. Like we don't talk about enough of the Russian Revolution in the United States. They don't want you to know about that. Other than it was a failure and communism failed, and and it obviously millions died and Stalin is bad and all this stuff. Like they just highlight what they want you to know. Whereas in Russia, people have a more wide range of what they know. They know what the West thinks. They know what, and that includes the United States and the Americas. They know what Europe thinks, and then they also get to hear China and Russia and West Asia. And Africa, and there's a lot of connections right now being built between Russia, Africa, obviously Russia, China, but Russia, China, and the Americas, like Latin America and Central America. And these connections, I think, are going to be extremely important going into the future, as well as the connections with Iran and West Asia and these countries that have all been affected directly by U.S. imperialism and are pushing back now, uniting, sort of taking this opportunity to be like, nope, you're not going to decide for us anymore. We're going to decide for us. And I think that's the most important thing, more than anything, is these countries are exerting their own national sovereignty.
Yeah, the emergence of the multipolar world instead of this unipolar, dominated both economically and militarily by the US and NATO. So, and the NATO expansion. I think the days of the NATO expansion are going to end with this. There was a very sobering conversation that was had by Noam Chomsky. I don't agree with everything that Noam Chomsky's been saying lately, but there is something he did say about China. He said, if there is, because we just sent $1 billion, as you know, for weapons in Taiwan, the Biden administration did that, and they're sending delegations against China's wishes and really poking that China. And I think you would put up, and real quick, Fee, could you tell people how to find you on Telegram? Because you have a really good news channel that I share a lot of your stuff. How can they find that?
It's Fiorella's Telly. It's Fiorella because I've had like creepers try to find me by my name on Telegram and get my number and all this stuff. So I named it
So
Fiorella's
you have a
Telly.
news channel, yeah. So if you look for Fiorella
That's
News,
my Telegram public.
yeah, public, yeah. And then if you,
Yeah.
and then we have that in the link, we have your links. And then, but back to the China thing, so sending $1 billion of weapons just to kind of push that. But Noam Chomsky has said, if we end up in a hot war with China, it's over for humanity. Maybe that's it. It's done.
Yeah. I
yeah.
think most people know that, but I think there are some arrogant psychopaths that are willing to just roll the dice and push China, and they're pushing China.
They call it a limited nuclear war. There is no such thing as a limited nuclear war. What's frightening about that is there are people in the British and the United States in those top administrations, rather than doing diplomacy, they're willing to drive it to this precipice of nuclear war.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Are you finding, because you're living in Moscow, are you finding that people are concerned about that possibility, or are they feeling like, cooler heads will prevail, there will be diplomacy at some point?
I think it's mixed. I mean, I definitely think that the fear of a nuclear war is there, but I think it's more of like these Americans are insane to be pushed, because it's not being pushed by Russia or China, it's being pushed by the United States. Correct. They're the ones that are like, hey, let's and they're like, what are these people doing? Like, they can't afford, the United States can't afford to fight a two-front war, and that's what they're trying to do right now, because we all know this war, Ukraine versus Russia is US and NATO versus Russia. It's not Ukraine. So that is happening. And of course, Taiwan and what they just did with flying their warplanes. I mean, this is provoking the bear and provoking the dragon, and they can't fight both of them. And they're not in a position to, and neither is Europe, especially the European Union is not in a position to either. And I think I do think there's an element of them trying to see how far they can go with China, because they feel like, oh, China didn't respond militarily. But that's the thing they need to understand, is the Eastern perspective into how to deal with things is not the same as the Western perspective. It's a completely different strategy. China is responding economically. Russia is responding economically and militarily to an extent. But if they wanted to respond even more militarily, they could have had Ukraine a long time ago. Right. And that's what people don't understand. They're being very hesitant with their responses. If they responded the way the West responds, we would already be done. We would already be at war. And the West is operating like, thinks that people will respond the way they are responding. And I always equate this to chess, because Pasta and I play chess, and he comes in like the West. He's always like, I'm going to attack you. I'm going to take I'm going to try to take your piece. And I just sit there. I'm like, okay. And then he doesn't realize I have another move, and I just sit back and wait. And like, that's like the Western. Yes, Pasta, you're the West in the scenario, the American.
Sorry, Pasta, you're the West in this. But
that's pretty much how they are. They're just like attack, and then it doesn't go well for them. And so I think that's what's happening now. And I mean, I think that the fear is always there about nuclear war. I really just hope, I hope that maybe at least the idea that the economies will fail and that rich people won't be able to have their money will stop these people from nuclear disaster. Although knowing them, they'll be like, well, we can at least go to our bunkers and stuff. So yeah.
Speaking of chess, I love to play it too. My brother Michael was very into it, so into it that back in the day he used to play it by mail, which I think is ridiculous. That's a bit much. That's really nerdy. But
that's crazy.
But I love chess too, and my big strategy was using the bit. I'll just give it because I'm not going to use it when I play with you. The bishop strategy to win. But you're right. There's like even the strategies are made by Western chess players, so it's always very aggressive and very like most, killing the most pawns, right?
But Russians are some of the best chess players in the world.
Russians are the world's best chess players because they play differently, right?
Yeah.
Different strategies.
Yeah.
Different stratagems. So I wanted to also ask you about something coming up, because you are going to Brazil. Is that correct? Could you talk a little bit about what
Yes.
you're going to be doing there and what that's about?
Yeah, so we've been kind of talking about it for a while. There's this happening, there's a lot of things happening in Latin America where they're electing people that are kind of focusing on the country and having connections and relationships with people in the South American and Central American continent. We went to elections in Nicaragua, in Honduras, where they elected, Nicaragua re-elected Daniel Ortega, who's like literal public enemy number one of them of the United States, kicked out the OAS, a bunch of things. Right, like that's my type of guy right there. That's the kind of, if I were covering, I would be that person. And then, they have been electing progressive-ish leaders to anywhere from progressive center left to like, Daniel Ortega. So it's been kind of like that wide gap, and it's different, but at the same time, it's allowing for these relationships to flourish more with China via the Belt and Road Initiative, and with Russia as well. So what's happening in Brazil is you have Lula, who was imprisoned by Bolsonaro, and then you have Bolsonaro and Lula facing each other, and you have kind of like this rematch, and a lot of people support Lula in Brazil, and Bolsonaro doesn't have as much support, but there are people painting him as being opposing the status quo and all of that. So they're trying to paint him as this sort of populist, which he really isn't a populist. He's very much the status quo, in line with the United States. The only thing he wasn't necessarily 100% in line with, and I think it was more so for politics than for actual belief, was COVID. And so some people like that he didn't like lock down and stuff. Right. And so there's that aspect of it, but they're having the elections in October. So Pasta and I and a group of our friends are hopefully going to be able to observe the elections. Good. And make sure they go as they should be, because Bolsonaro is already saying the elections are going to be rigged. Lula is already saying, they're trying to start a process where people aren't going to be allowed to vote. So there's this whole thing happening, and Brazil is extremely important. It's like the largest economy in Latin America, and it's really, if Brazil goes, there will be literally very few countries left in South America that are partial to the West at this point. Colombia was a very huge victory. We were there as well. And so victory for those countries that want their sovereignty, that are opposing Western hegemony.
Freedom, yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
and that's,
Simone, I read this Nina Simone quote recently that really resonated with me. And she said, my definition of freedom is not being afraid. And I think that's the whole political drive by the United States and Europe right now, is to instill fear in its citizenry to get things done, and to take away freedoms and authoritative, is to use fear as like a weapon, sanctions, that kind of thing. Yeah. And harm.
Yeah. And so what's happening is just a pushback against decades and decades and decades of just being completely under the boot. And they're trying to get away. And I think there's a lot of, and some of it isn't even ideological. Some of it is just economic, like logical, like, oh, well, we see where the US and NATO are going. So we see China rising. So we're going to do business with China. They're offering us a better relationship. We'll see what happens. It's just more, it's more than ideological, because even Ecuador, who has a very neoliberal president in Guillermo Lasso, is going to sign a treaty to do a trade with China. And this isn't a leftist government. This is a very neoliberal pro-US government. So it's not about ideology. It's about also economics and being able to just go where the wind is going, right? Like just you see the things moving a certain way. So so we're gonna go. We look at elections all the time. We want to make sure that the elections are fair and free. We also want to show people what could be in the United States, because we don't have those elections in the United States. We don't have fair elections at all. And if people really realize when I say that, we don't have fair elections, you don't really have a say. When people finally realize that, then maybe they'll be angry enough to do something about it. I don't, I'm not as optimistic as Pasta. I don't think we can vote our way out of this, or that if we expose them, they're just going to allow that. I think we're past that point in the United States. And I think there has to be more of a people uprising, not against each other like they want, you know,
Right. They want
MAGAs
a civil
and
war
liberals
right
to
now, right? Mhm.
yeah, but against the corrupt government,
Yeah.
you know, in the way that's organized and directional, not in a way that's, you know, we're all just gonna blah. Yeah, it's gotta be organized. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, like the rhetoric you'd mentioned earlier about fascism, you know, I there was another one of your colleagues, I think, on Don Porter, who talked about the danger of a civil war in the U.S. And he's right. I mean, the kind of rhetoric that
Yeah.
Biden was just using, calling Republicans fascists, and you set out a really good definition, which I want to save that clip, and I'm going to send it to you, because that was really a fantastic way to kind of roll out what fascism really is in comparison to the rhetoric the US tries to say. And that division language that they're doing, putting in the voters' minds that some Republicans are fascists, is meant to divide and meant to create violence within our own country, which is really awful. So the opposite of unifying, right?
Yeah, because that's what they want. If they get a civil war, they don't get a class war. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's benefit, and they can then enact what they want, which is more surveillance control over the population, so they don't continue rebelling, which is why they're labeling everybody under the sun as a domestic violent extremist. And that's what January 6th was used for, because it's never just about the right or the left. It's about everybody. So
Yeah, you're
yeah.
absolutely right. Well, okay, so our audience that's listening and watching, where can they find your work, and how can they find you, and what do you, and some other stuff that's coming up, so we can, as we go here.
So we'll be live tomorrow on the Convo Couch. I was going to do something today, but I'm not going to have time. But yeah, I'll just be live tomorrow on the Convo Couch. We're going to do a regular show at noon. And you guys will see me on RT. I've been on the news desk, but I'm going to be doing more corresponding. So I'll share whatever I can share, and then you'll see me back and forth. I'll be doing, and then of course you'll see me in Brazil. I'll be in
for
Brazil.
interrupting. For corresponding, do you mean like you'll be out in the field and you'll go out to different countries, or just
It depends. It depends. Some people do. Sometimes it'll just be mostly studio packages and stuff, or just live with the other anchor and stuff. So it really depends. But yeah, I'm just going to be here mostly in Moscow for this month. And when I go, obviously back when I go to Brazil and then to the States, I'll let you guys know what we're doing. But if you do guys want to help us out, because the flights for me to get out are ridiculous, because of the sanctions, because of everything they're doing to prevent any Russians from getting out. It's basically like Turkish Airlines is the only airline that is fast enough. If not, you have to go through like the Arab countries. It takes you like 4 days to travel, and it's like impossible. So it's really hard to travel from Russia now. So we have a Give, Send, Go. So if you guys want to check that out to help us for the Brazil, because we're doing it on our own, and we're covering all of the expenses and stuff, and we're just doing it because we want to show you guys what's going on, and it's such an important election that can determine so much. So yeah, so check that out, and obviously you can find me at Fiorella Isabel M on Twitter. And you can also find me on Telegram, Fiorella's Telly, and obviously RT on Rumble. The Convo Couch is now on Rumble at YouTube, Rockfin, Odyssey. Are we on Odyssey? Not yet. We were, but we have to get it back up again. But yeah, so thank you for having me, Tara. I appreciate it.
I mean, it's been fantastic. I love hanging out with you. Fee, we could talk for hours. We went a little bit over, audience,
yes.
And I love that we were able to, but we're able to because you know what? It's Independent News Network, and we do what we want, and Reef is down with it. So whatever. So and that's why you want to support like independent content, like Fee and Pasta's work on the Convo Couch, like Kit Cabello, who we were ribbing about pizza, his show on Hardlands Media, Savvy Sabs. There's a lot of people in the space trying to bring truth, trying to bring a different perspective. So give support and shout out to INN and the different shows that are on INN as well. And Fee, thank you. You're resplendent and beautiful and fabulous. And I admire the work that you do so much, and continue to follow your work and share it a lot. So please keep giving us those insights from Russia, and I hope you meet some nice Ruskies and have some fun, as well as all the work that you're doing. Have some fun too. And to the audience who joined us, thank you so much. Check out the links that are at the bottom there, and you can help out Fee and Pasta about their trip to Colombia. Make sure you give a little love and help that out. And thank you for joining us today. So there you have it. We'll see you next time.
Bye.